I leave you a beer and not peanut out.
What time did they get out of here? What time did Energy get out of here? Pat?
If everyone would settle down, we'll get started here. Okay, first bill is Senate Bill 397, and in lieu of the prime sponsor, if you would introduce yourself and introduce the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman Gray, members of the committee. My name is Grant Bosse. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff for the New Hampshire Senate, and I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 397 on behalf of Senator Carrie Gendreau, the bill's prime sponsor. This bill would appropriate $2 million to the Department of Natural Resources in order to remediate OHRV and snowmobile trails damaged by severe weather last year, such as the flooding in Cheshire County that knocked out trails and rail trails in that region. The funds would be distributed through the Grant and Aid program, which is normally funded through OHRV and snowmobile registration fees and unrefunded gas taxes. This user-funded program provides grants and loans to nonprofit OHRV and snowmobile clubs to maintain our trails, a Four Seasons recreational resource for tourists and Granite Staters alike. The program works well, but needs a one-time boost to respond to last year's severe weather. The Trails Division is here to talk more about why these funds are needed and how they would be used. I would defer questions to them and the other advocates behind me. The committee has more demand than supply on the current surplus. We understand that, but Senator Gendreau believes this one-time $2 million investment in our trail infrastructure is worth your support. Thank you for your consideration of Senate Bill 397.
Even though he may not want them, do any of the senators have questions for him? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I see at least one representative on here. Come on up, Mr. Willett. Yeah.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much. I'll be very brief. I'm here today as a representative of Coas District 3. I'm also the chairman of the Commission to Study OHRV Use in New Hampshire, and I'm the Trails Administrator for the Metallic ATV Club, the largest ATV club in the state. I've got a statement I will pass around, but to be very brief, between OHRV and snowmobiles in the state, it's about a $1 billion economic boost to New Hampshire's economy. The clubs have got, especially in the North Country, have got to be fairly large businesses. Over the last 5 years, between the town of Pittsburgh, their club, and the Cobra Club, we spent $2 million developing and maintaining trails over the last 5 years alone. And most of the money does come from registrations through Grant and Aid, but about 20% of it the clubs raise on their own. So it's a total of about $400,000 these clubs have raised, volunteer clubs have raised over the last 5 years to take care of the trails. As the gentleman previously said, there's no way a volunteer club can cover the damage that was done. The summer storms in Pittsburgh alone were over $500,000, and there was some very significant damage done in December in those storms that they really don't have a number yet on what it's going to be. The motorized sports industry has really become the cornerstone of the North Country economy, and it's very, very important that we can do everything we can to keep it updated and maintained. So in conclusion, I'd just like to say I really would like you to pass SB 397 to help these clubs to support the state economy.
Okay, questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative. Executive Councilor Kennedy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
I don't think your light's on yet.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm also here representing, I should say I'm representing District 1, Executive Council's District 1, which spans from Durham all the way to the Canadian border. I haven't testified a lot this year in the various committees, but when there's something that's really important, I tend to show my face, and this is one of those bills that I think is very important. So I ask for your support for Senate Bill 397. And I think as the following representative mentioned, this is very important to the northern economy, but also the statewide economy. The ability to have open and groomed trails is important. I had the opportunity more recently to visit the storm damage in July and also in December. July, a lot of the damage was up in Pittsburgh, Stewartstown, Clarksville, and more recently we saw the damage up in Gorham, Randolph, and Berlin. And you know, the interesting part is that when you're in Concord or other parts of the state and you don't see or feel the impact of the damage, but you actually go do the site visits, you say, oh my gosh, there's a lot of damage. I mean, you saw culverts that were just ripped out of the ground. You saw, you know, bridges that were undermined. You saw, you know, trees that were hanging over the trail system. You saw some of the trails totally obliterated. And you can go to Gorham and half that Gorham Country Club golf course is totally destroyed because there was another river that was created that basically there are two rivers now near the golf course, one that took out, you know, the 9 holes that's left stones and debris and so forth. So the December storm damage had a significant impact on the trail system. So much it was about $500,000 worth of damage. That's on really the top of the $2 million request because there's $2 million worth of damage in July of this year up in the Pittsburgh and Stewartstown area. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the specifics with regards to this request that I think that probably need a little bit more attention and maybe even an amendment. But as you know that the In-Aid grant program, that is the vehicle for them to do their maintenance on the trail system. And so 75%, 80%, I believe, is reimbursed for the ATV clubs, and then 60% for the snowmobile clubs. So basically for their rental equipment, they're getting a certain percentage. And so they get 100% of the materials reimbursed, but they're not getting, the clubs are not getting a total reimbursement. And so in this particular amendment that I would suggest that they get 100% reimbursement, because right now the clubs, the ATV clubs and the snowmobile clubs are out of money. They've already spent their money for this for the calendar year. So if you're going to go back to them and give them money, you're going to give them at a you're going to put them at a disadvantage because they don't have any money to pay that 20 or 40%. So that's one consideration of the legislation I hope that you might look at. The other thing is there's a mechanism to this legislation that would suggest that FEMA, when they working on the declaration, that FEMA will pay back at 1.75% of that $2 million ask, and then put it back into the general revenue fund. Well, we know it's going to take months and years for that to happen. So this is a non-lapsing fund. So this allows you to access, and help out the trail system. Because a lot of the damage in Pittsburgh this past July has not been fixed, okay? So it still needs to be repaired prior to the summer. And then some of the damage up in Gorham, Randolph, and in Gorham, that has been repaired to some extent, but they used whatever money they had in their maintenance fund that was left, and just to make sure those trails, snowmobile trails, were interconnected. Because There was a time not too long ago that they were considering shutting the whole snowmobile trail system down up there because there was so much damage. But we had a period of time where there was no snow that came in for about a 10-day or 2-week period. They were able to rapidly deploy some of those subcontractors with their backhoes to repair those trails. But again, there's about $500,000 worth of damage. And some of those outstanding bills with these contractors still exist. But they did it knowing that they have an economy that they have to protect up there. Lastly, I would just like to say that this is a 60-day effective date. I would suggest that it be effective immediately after the pass of legislation. We need to deploy these resources right out into the field and make sure that this work gets done. Are there any questions, Mr. Chairman?
Questions from the senators? Okay, thank you very much. I didn't see
Okay.
any.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Rosenwald, did you want to talk about your amendment so that anyone who testifies after this can at least be aware of it? Sure. Turn your mic on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you all have a copy of Amendment 0235S. I'm very sympathetic to this, but I know we have we're going to have a lot of calls for funding this year, and it's not a budget year. So this amendment for us to think about is making the appropriation contingent on ARPA funds that are appropriated but not going to be spent.
Are copies of the amendment out on the table?
Oh, no, but I can come out if you want. Thank you.
We might as well. That way, again, they'll at least have a chance to look at them for a minute or two. Certainly funding is a big issue today. And so anybody that wants a copy, just raise your hand and they'll pass them out to you, or you can come up and get them, whichever. And Brian? Come on, Brian LaBrie.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Gray, Senate Finance Committee. I have a prepared statement I'd like to read. My name is Brian LaBrie, and I serve as the Vice President of the New Hampshire Snowmobile Association. Thank you for letting me take this opportunity to address you today. I'm here today in support of Bill 397. This is a bill that is vital to the restoration of our state snowmobile trails. As you may or may not know, our trail network has recently faced some significant damage due to torrential rains, both in July and December. There's some photos for reference that are going around now that you might be able to take a look at. They're not great, but I want you to at least have a reference point. These adverse weather conditions have severely impacted this year's snowmobiling season. The damage is simply overwhelming for clubs, limited resources, and their volunteers. Unfortunately, this setback is further compounded by the challenges posed by an already abbreviated season due to limited snowfall and late snowfall. I think it's safe to say without exaggeration, the state of our trails is far from ideal. The financial burden of the necessary repairs far exceeds the capacity of our individual clubs. While the grant and aid process is well suited for regular trail grooming and maintenance, the extent of the damage suppresses its effective scope. I would respectfully urge the committee to consider a direct appropriation for the repairs outlined in Senate Bill 397, deviating from the standard 60-40 split between the state and the clubs. The financial strain on the clubs is just simply too much to bear. Given the urgency of the situation and the brevity of the snowmobiling season, it would also be beneficial if the bill could take place or go into effect immediately upon passage. Timely action is not only crucial for the health of our trail system, but it is also essential for the numerous small businesses and tourism industry that rely heavily on winter recreational activities across all user groups in our state. In closing, it's also important to note that the NHSA also supports the allocation of funds from this bill to the Bureau of Trails to assist them with making repairs as well. Thank you for your time and consideration today. With all that said, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from the committee members?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you very much. New Hampshire Trails Bureau, Craig, ready?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Craig Rennie. I'm the Chief of the Bureau of Trails at the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. And we manage 1,000 miles of OHRV trails, 7,400 miles of snowmobile trails, 300 miles of multi-use rail trails, and then in fact 260 miles of roads on the Connecticut Lakes Headwaters property in Pittsburgh. So there's a lot of trails throughout the state. I guess I'd like to thank Senator Gendro and the bill's sponsors for their generous support of the $2 million remediating OHRV and snowmobile trail damage caused by weather-related events in July of 2023. That also included significant damage and washouts in the Pittsburgh and Swansea areas, as Councilor Kenny mentioned. Initial damages estimates for the July 2023 storm damage is over $1.5 million and growing. Some repairs have been done, but majority have not. In addition, as mentioned, the significant December 18th rain event caused extensive trail damage in the Berlin, Gorham, and Randolph areas, particularly within Jericho Mountains State Park. The Bureau's been actively working, as mentioned, to repair these areas and restore connectivity on the snowmobile trail with that opening we had with no snow, so that we could, again, have connection on the main corridors from the Berlin and Gorham communities. But there's still a lot of work to do up there. A significant portion of the impact has occurred on state lands, and so we respectfully ask the bill sponsors to consider potentially amending the bill to distribute 50% of the appropriations to Bureau of Trails in a dedicated non-lapsing fund for storm-related trail repair work on state lands, and then 50% distributed to the Grant and Aid Program to assist the OHRV and snowmobile clubs. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. And next on the list is Rich Parsons, New Hampshire Office for Highway, Off-Highway Vehicle Association.
Good afternoon. Again, for the record, Rich Parsons, RYP Granite Strategies, and here today on behalf of the New Hampshire Off-Highway Vehicle Association, which represents the OHRVs. We also are supportive of the bill, and just to not repeat other folks, we also would support the amendment being offered to have 50% go to trails directly, since there's substantial damage on rail trails and Jericho Park where they can just handle it themselves, and 50% to the GIA. And we would reiterate that we'd love for at least this portion of the GIA funds to be 100% reimbursed. Some of these projects that are going to be required to be done are replacing full culverts, are huge cost projects, and you'd be looking at clubs being required to raise, 5-figure amounts of money just for these single storm damage projects alone, let alone the other projects that they need to do yearly. The GIA is obviously funded through registration fees, and it was a perfect storm, pun intended, I guess, there. In terms of the storms caused the registrations to be significantly lower this year, so we don't anticipate there would be as much in the form of GIA funds next year anyway. And I just saw, obviously, Senator Rosenwald's amendment. I can't speak to whether or not you guys would do this, but if this is the only way we get the money, beggars can't be choosers. I think any way we can try to fund these critical storm damage trails would be necessary, and I thank you for your creativity.
Questions from the senators? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Just one. Registrations are down this year. Last year, were they up?
Yes, we had, I don't know if they exactly were the same as 2020. 2020 was a great year, but we did have kind of rode a high of people wanting to be outside and recreating. But this year, July, people just didn't even register because they weren't going to come up because trails were closed so early into the season. Some never even reopened. So registrations overall this year were down from the previous couple of year spike that we received.
Good.
Follow up?
Thank you. The registration fees, do they stay in the fund or do they lapse?
They stay in the fund. A substantial amount are given out though yearly. I think it was over $1 million last year alone for OHRV clubs.
Thank you. Could we ask for a balance of what's in the fund from
LBA,
LBA.
certainly they'll, if they can do it, maybe not for today, but we'll ask.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator D'Alessandro, you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Rich, nice to see you in this new capacity. You look magnificent, well-dressed, well-groomed.
And he's got his I voted sticker on from the
And congratulations on
artwork from the
voting.
kids.
That's true. Rich, didn't we make a contribution, or wasn't a contribution made out of federal funds to trails? I think Senator Hennessy, when she was here, made that request. How much was that? Wasn't that $950,000, something of that nature? Gentleman from the
There's two chairs up there. We can let you both sit.
Yeah, again, Craig Rennie, Bureau of Trails. So for ARPA monies, we received $4 million to purchase winter grooming equipment, $3 million for winter grooming equipment, and $1 million for creating a statewide trail mapping tool, a GIS-based trail mapping tool. So that's what the ARPA money was used for there.
Okay.
Yep.
Additional questions? Yes,
Was that Senator Hennessy's request? Because I was on the Gopher Committee at that time, and she made a request for the trails, and this seems to be something maybe akin to that, but a different situation.
I think Senator Hennessy had worked on, I think it was House Bill 2, to change the percentage of reimbursement to OHRV clubs to 80%, because in the administrative rules, it's currently 60%. So I think that's what Senator Hennessy had helped us with, or worked on on that bill.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. That was the end of the people who have signed up on the sheet. Is there anyone who wanted to testify on Senate Bill 397? Your name, ma'am?
My name is Shelley Withers, and I'm with the Director of Aeronautics Rail and Transit at the Department of Transportation.
And to be fair, she did sign up, but she did not check the box to speak, so.
Wanted to help my friend Craig.
Okay.
Yes, again, apologies. I'm Shelley Winters. I'm the Director of Aeronautics, Rail, and Transit at the Department of Transportation. We work closely with the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources and are in favor of their recommendation of amendment allowing 50% of the funds to be administered by DNCR Bureau of Trails for state-owned land. I think, as most people know, and has been articulated several times, there was a lot of damage to state-owned rail trails. Currently, DOT is the owner of about 70% of the state-owned rail trails, and DNCR owns 30%. However, DNCR manages 90% of the trails, so we've got a great relationship between owner and manager, and having those funds accessible for state-owned rail lines, agnostic of ownership, under DNCR's management, so that we can keep the longitudinal corridors open to be the spines to the other trail network. So as a department, we're collaborating with DNCR, and we're supportive of this request and consideration of needed funds to maintain state-owned rail trails as well as state-owned trails.
All right, any questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. In addition to, there was one other person who signed up in support here at the meeting, and online 6 signed up in support, 1 signed up in opposition. And with that, we'll close this public hearing, and we'll open the next one, 551, in just a few minutes. And with that, we're ready for Senate Bill 551, and we have the prime sponsor here, and he'll introduce himself and the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Dan Ennis from Bradford, New Hampshire, representing District 7. And Senate Bill 551 addresses a need in the Warner area of the state with respect to the Concord Lake Sunapee Rail Trail. And this is a trail that's, I guess I would call it under development at this point in time. And we have an opportunity to take a step forward with this. This bill specifically requests $600,000 in general funds that will serve as a match from the congestion mitigation and air quality grant of a similar amount to build a section of the trail between Warner and Contoocook. And you know, rail trails are interesting, and there's a lot of potential with them that I think in our state we sometimes don't always recognize. I look back to my home state of Ohio. My brother and his sister, or his wife rather, lived there, my sister-in-law. And over a couple of summers ago, I rode one of the rail trails. And Loveland, Ohio is a perfect example of what can happen with development when a rail trail comes to town. Loveland was a small, sleepy town, not much going on economically. The rail trail was built. And when the trail came, business came. Small businesses, independent operators, the types of businesses that really thrive in New Hampshire. Ice cream shops, restaurants, beer, retailers, bike rentals, and so on. It brought life back to the center of that town. This particular rail trail is going to be a long-term project, I'm certain. But when I look at towns along this route, particularly Bradford, right in the middle between Warner and Newberry, I see a lot of potential. And it's a beautiful trail. The rail line was taken out in the mid-'60s. This is an opportunity to take one big step forward to realizing the potential vision of this particular trail. There are many folks, several folks, who will testify to this bill. And a couple of them have much more detail on the specifics of the project than I do. So I'm happy to take questions, but I do think they'll be very able to answer your questions as well.
Questions? Senator D'Alessandro has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick one. The congestion mitigation and equality grant, has that been received?
I can't answer that specifically, but I know that someone behind me can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
you.
Senator Whitley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I wanted to hop over here from Judiciary to express my support for the bill. For the record, my name is Becky Whitley. I'm honored to represent Senate District 15, which used to include the community of Warner. It no longer does. But I do represent Hopkinton, and I wanted to bring to your attention 2 letters of support from the town of Hopkinton, which were emailed to you. But in particular, 2 separate bodies in the town of Hopkinton felt that this bill was so necessary to our local economy that they did submit letters. One was the Select Board. So you'll see a letter from Neil Cass, our town administrator, who details why this bill is so important for Hopkinton, for, in particular, the village of Contoocook, and why it has the full support of the Hopkinton Select Board. I also wanted to point out another letter from Anna Wells, who was our Economic Development Director. Hopkinton is a very small town, but it does play an important role in the capital region, and they have done a significant amount of planning, thinking about how to develop our community in a way that supports our constituents and our town people, in addition to our businesses. So I want to bring your attention to this bill about why it's so important for our village. So a piece from her letter, Anna Wells, who is our Economic Development Director, has indicated that the town of Hopkinton's Economic Development Committee has long supported the vision of the Concord Lake Sunapee Rail Trail. In addition to the air quality, public safety, and public health benefits resulting from this trail creation, the Concord Lake Sunapee Rail Trail contributes to the vibrancy of Hopkinton's village of Contoocook. The trail will be a draw for visitors and residents to the shops, restaurants, and services in the village. The more segments that are completed, the stronger the impact to our local economy. Additionally, this appropriation built on the recent and ongoing investments by the town of Hopkinton in support of the Concord Lake Sunapee Rail Trail, including improved parking, sidewalks, and crosswalks in downtown Contoocook, and the creation of the Stevens Rail Trail and the Houston Park Kearsarge Ave connector. So this is just a little portion of the testimony that they have emailed to you, but I did want to bring it to your attention because it is so important to the town of Hopkinton. So I don't know much about, I don't think I can answer your question about the matching grant, but certainly folks behind me will, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And continuing on with the Sunapee Rail Trail, we have, I think it's Tim, and I'm not sure I can decipher the rest of it, but.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Tim Blagden with the Friends of the Concord Lake Sunapee Rail Trail. I emailed in a letter of support from the rail trail community or from our rail trail nonprofit. The official applicant for the CMAQ grant was the town of Warner because nonprofits are not allowed to apply for that grant program. So the town applied at our request. And Senator D'Alessandro, the answer to your question is the CMAQ grants are all part of the 10-year plan. So that 10-year plan is now back with the legislature. It's gone through the GASSET process. It's gone past the governor's desk, and it's now back to the state legislature. So it is pending. And we thank Senators Innes and Whitley for their support of this bill. So a little bit about the Concord Lake Sunapee Rail Trail. The vision is to go for 34 miles through 6 communities without the benefit of an intact corridor. So this is a quintessential New Hampshire project where it starts by knocking on doors and seeing if landowners are willing to participate. So far, over 30 landowners have granted us easements, and of the 34 miles, we've locked down 16 miles of the corridor already. And in terms of permanent recorded easements at the Merrimack County Registry of Deeds. So we're becoming a linear land trust, as it were, working with willing landowners. This particular project is actually the project that started the whole thing. Back in October of 2013, we walked this project with Federal Highway and New Hampshire DOT to ask if it would ever be possible to build this section of trail. And the response we got was if we got them an appropriate plan, that it could be possible. So in the 10 years since, we've worked with the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Program. We had engineering students from Dartmouth come down and design preliminary plans for this section. And we've worked with the communities up and down the corridor and the landowners securing property. We have done quite a number of projects, some of them funded with the Bureau of Trails Recreational Trails Program, some funded with NHCDFA tax credits. We've gotten ARPA funds from Merrimack County. We've gotten private funds from foundations. We would not be here asking for the state to step in to support this regional project if it was possible another way. But everybody who's touched this project has given their best to see it happen, and we're here to ask the state for support to get us from essentially from one side of the interstate to the other. While Interstate 89 was a great boon economically to the region, it is a great wall when it comes to getting from one side of the road to the other. And we found a way to do it where we will be ducking underneath 3 bridges and not having to build bridges of our own. It's the least expensive way to reestablish a human connection. But we need your help on this one. And I'm happy to take questions.
Questions from the committee? I have one. How many miles is contiguous? You said 16 of the 34 miles you've got permission, but what's your biggest contiguous section?
So biggest contiguous section is, it got bigger just before this hearing, as the city of Concord gave us 2 more parcels, so it's now 3 miles there. The Stevens Rail Trail, which is already built, that's another 1.5 miles, and this will add on to that. We're very close to linking the villages of Hopkinton and Warner, villages of Kentucky and Warner together. This is the critical piece. And most of this particular project is in the interstate median, where the northbound and southbound lanes are wide apart, and the river is in the middle. Some old farmland is in there. There's a cemetery in there, and we'll be down in there as well.
Okay, thank you. Senator Rosenwald, I
Thank
guess
you.
I spared a question.
So the CMAQ grant that this would be a match for is pending in the 10-year plan?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next, A. Chaffee.
It's a mouthful, I know.
Well, I was gonna, from the writing, it looks like Aslan, but.
It's Arlen.
Arlen?
Arlen Chaffee.
So that's an R, it looks like an S, so.
Yeah, okay, I'll work on that for the next time. Arlen Chaffee from Warner, New Hampshire. I'm here as a rail trail user. I lived in Newmarket, New Hampshire for 30 years, Rockingham County, and was instrumental in getting the mills in downtown Newmarket redeveloped. But part and parcel of that was seeing the emergence of the Rockingham Recreational Trail, which runs all the way from Newfields, Newmarket to Manchester, and seeing what's occurred there. We've talked about economic development. That's generally indisputable with rail trails. They have a tendency to bring that because they're multi-use. So you'll see horses out there, you'll see snowshoers, you'll see runners, you'll see cyclists, dog walkers, and they're all us. We're neighbors, and we get along. And since moving to the Warner area, I've had the pleasure of utilizing the Northern Rail Trail, which starts in Boscawen and runs up to Lebanon. And I grew up in Goffstown, and to see the Goffstown-Manchester Rail Trail come into being, it's a tremendous boon. Just a small link, I think it's 5.5, 6 miles, but it brings a lot of people in. So beyond economic development, we're talking community development. And this particular bill adheres to a regional community development. We're talking 6 towns? Yeah. 6 towns that it would interconnect. And more importantly, its southern terminus would meet with, ultimately with the Northern Rail Trail someday. With that community development comes stewardship, where some of these abandoned rail trail properties are turned into dumping grounds or ersatz meeting places. When you populate them with people that are using it for recreation, it kind of turns the tide on that and becomes a source of pride for the local community. In the instance of the Warner section that we're talking about here, we've got Bagley Park on the other side of Route 89 on Route 103. The only way down there as a kid to get to the ball fields is to walk or ride your bike on Route 103 past 2 exit on-ramps and off-ramps currently. That would all change. So that's what it would mean for Warner. And each town along the way, whether it's Kentucky, Bradford, Newbury, is going to experience similar. And finally, this is the hidden gem, is it's been reported that property values along recreational corridors are actually enhanced, which serves to increase tax base. So all those combined together make rail trails a good deal, but in particular, I wanted to stop by today and support this one. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you. And last on my list here is Mike Tardif. I'll sit corrected when you tell me what I should have said.
Perfect. Mike Tardif with Central New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission here in Concord. Good evening or good afternoon. I'm here to express my support for the bill. Our Regional Planning Commission is made up of 20 communities. Warner and Bradford and Hopkinton are all members of the commission. The rail trail is in a variety of local plans, regional plans, or economic development strategy. We're really excited about the opportunity for the CMAQ funds, but the match is a really heavy lift for small communities. So supportive of any opportunities to help move along. You know, Tim referred back to the site walks back in 2013, glacial progress. We're getting there. These things take a long time, and this would be very helpful to move that along and fill a gap in a basically a statewide trail network. So we're supportive of the bill.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. That was the last one on my list. Is there anybody that didn't sign up that wants to speak? Seeing none, there were 5 people who signed up in support online and 1 in opposition. And with that, we'll close the public hearing on this, and we'll open the public hearing on 452 in just a minute. Jeff? Jeff, if you pass that down, I appreciate it. Okay, we'll open the public hearing on Senate Bill 452, and we have the prime sponsor who will introduce the bill and himself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Dan Innes from Bradford, New Hampshire, representing District 7. And I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 452. It's a pretty straightforward and simple bill that would provide $250,000 in the current fiscal year to the Department of Business and Economic Affairs to facilitate the hiring of additional small business development counselors for the SBDC, which is housed at UNH. And I should make a note that while I work at UNH, I'm not involved with the SBDC in any way and will not benefit from the passage of this bill should it succeed. There are some folks here from the SBDC who are behind me who I know can answer the detailed questions you might have about this particular bill, but I'm happy to take any questions if you have them.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. Liz?
Thank you.
Good afternoon. If it's okay, I was going to ask Jason Cannon, our Associate State Director, to join me to save time on the testifying piece.
I know how to do 2 check marks instead of 1.
Perfect. Already making things more efficient. Love it. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Gray and members of the Senate Finance Committee. I am Liz Gray. I'm the State Director for the New Hampshire Small Business Development Center. Again, Jason, you want to introduce yourself?
Jason Cannon. I'm the Associate State Director of the SBDC.
We are both very pleased to be here today to voice our support for Senate Bill 452. I want to also thank Senator Innes, of course, for being the prime sponsor, and Senators D'Alessandro and Rosenwald for their co-sponsoring of the legislation. And, you know, we recognize how difficult it is to make any decisions around appropriating additional funds, especially outside the traditional biennial budget process. But we hope to demonstrate the increased need as well as the return on investment for every dollar that the state invests into the Small Business Development Center. As you know, SBDC provides one-on-one confidential business advising and educational programs to small businesses across the state of New Hampshire. And when I say small, we work off US SBA's definition of under 500 employees. So that means that 99% of the businesses here in the state of New Hampshire are eligible for services provided through the SBDC. Everything that we do at no cost to the business owner. You know, you can work with us for 1 session or for 20 years as a client of ours, and we'll never charge you for the business advising or educational programs that we provide. In addition to our advising, we have specialty programs on cybersecurity, resiliency planning, analytics, and AI, a robust network of traditional and non-traditional funding partners, And we're launching both a supply chain, so contracting academy, and an export academy with our good partners at the Department of Business and Economic Affairs. Today, we're here more specifically to look at expanding access to SBDC's programs in the rural areas of the state. As a point of reference, approximately 75% of SBDC's clients are from rural areas of New Hampshire. Rural businesses face the same challenges as most businesses here in New Hampshire in terms of staffing, rising wage pressure, inflationary pressure of costs and goods, and access to capital. Unfortunately, many of our rural businesses are not aware of the resources that are available to them throughout the state or here in Concord. And when they are, they're often not as prepared to be able to access those services, whether it's financially or organizationally. SBDC helps fill that gap and raise awareness and the preparedness of those businesses. Although some small businesses have the resources to pay for private consultants, hire a CFO or a chief marketing officer or a chief technology officer, we are here for the tens of thousands of businesses in New Hampshire that do not have access to those higher paid positions or private consultants. It's the mom and pop restaurant that you love to go to in your downtowns. It's the small manufacturers, the second generation plumbing company in your neighborhood. It's the mom that makes those brownies that are just absolutely outstanding and wants to learn how to take those to the farmer's market or to be able to sell them in the bakery downtown. It's all of those businesses that need just a little bit of extra support to be able to help make their dreams of owning that business or starting that business come true. Our team provides not only a diverse set of expertise and experience to help our clients through these challenges and look at ways to start and grow their business, but they're also a sounding board. They're that cheerleader to help them keep going and to connect to that next resource to be able to make their business happen. In the last 4 years, SBDC has seen a truly dramatic increase in clients. In 2019, before the pandemic, we provided direct advising services to 862 clients throughout the state. In 2023, we provided direct advising to 1,721 clients. That's 2 clients shy of being a 100% increase in 4 short years. And I'm very proud to say that we have a 98.3% client satisfaction rate with those 1,700 plus clients. We've received other funding through the CARES Act during the pandemic to help us expand our business advising services when we saw that initial big spike in clients. And we've also received other federal funds through the Community Navigator Program or the Northern Border Regional Commission funds that goes directly to support Coos, Carroll, and Sullivan County. However, those funds, the CARES Act funding, as you know, is completely gone. The Community Navigator funding, that had also expired last year, and our Northern Border Regional Commission funding is coming to an end this year. So with those funding sources coming to an end, that will unfortunately require us to have to look at staffing. We are an extremely lean organization. About 85% of our budget goes directly back into staff. Although we are statewide, we don't pay for rent or anything in our local offices because we partner with various cities, regional development corporations, community colleges to host us. And they provide that space as an in-kind donation, again, to keep our costs down. So every dollar, 85% of the dollars that you provide to us goes directly to support those business advisors and the work that we're doing out in all of your communities. So I'd love for Jason to be able to share some thoughts on our impact and our clients. So.
Sure. I'm the data guy, so I get to share the numbers with you. We're part of a national association of all the SBDC programs in the country. And one of those requirements of being accredited by that association is that all of our impact that we claim and report has to be validated by clients. So they have to confirm the data is correct and that it's accurate, and they have to attribute that impact to, in part, to the assistance they receive from SBDC. So we can't just go in there and put in numbers. We need this in writing directly from the client. Last year in 2023, SBDC clients validated and attributed SBDC's assistance in helping them to access $37 million in new capital, increase sales by $26.4 million, and create and retain 628 jobs. Similar to an increase in clients, SBDC's total annual economic impact on the state of New Hampshire has also seen a significant increase. The calculation that we used was developed by an economist at UNH Paul College. It includes things like the average New Hampshire employee wage from Employment Security, 10-year averages for validated and attributed jobs created, retained, sales increase in capital formation, those data points I just mentioned. Based on this, the New Hampshire SBDC's calculated annual economic impact increased from $147 million in 2019 to $242 million last year in 2023. This is a 40% increase and an additional $95 million in economic impact in 4 short years.
You know, we could sit up here and talk to you for hours about the great programs, our amazing team of dedicated business advisors, and talk to you more about the work that we're doing in your specific districts and communities. But I know there are a few people that would like to share their perspective, having worked with us. But I also do want to mention, I'm hoping you received a letter from Dean Lucy Gilson from Paul College. Okay, I see nodding of heads, fantastic. And then Jackie Kemp from Sweeties Cupcakes. And then Chase Hageman from the Division of Economic Development mentioned that he sent a letter, although he can't support, he wanted to make sure that you all knew that we do have an extremely positive working relationship.
Senator Rosenwald, you had a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to understand why you would have the appropriation lapse in the middle of the next budget. Are you thinking that you spend $125,000 a year, but you didn't want to ask for 1 year and then 2 more years in the next budget?
I think the thought process as we were discussing it with Senator Innes, Senator Innes, if you wanted to chime in on that too, it was to help us to be able to continue the work that we are doing now and then come back to you during the regular biennial budget process to be able to look at what appropriation at that point makes sense for the increased needs of the businesses across the state coming to us, as well as, you know, kind of looking at overall operations and what we'd be able to maintain.
Senator Innes, you had a comment on that question?
Just a quick comment. We had there was a request in the budget for these funds last year that we didn't fund, and this is designed to carry us forward and to get us into the next budget cycle and to provide the support they need to continue. Yeah.
Senator Rosenwald, additional question?
Yes, I'll hold it for exec session.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Peter Van Berker.
My name's Ted Wright, thank you, and thank you for having me here in this organization. Peter Van Berkham, and my wife and I started Van Berkham Nursery in the late 80s in Chester in a small gravel pit, and over the next 10 years grew and moved into Deerfield, where we've been for ever since. And the nursery grew stepwise, little by little, in a very rural area of Deerfield. And then all of a sudden when 9/11 hit and the Twin Towers were hit, the phone stopped. And this was back in the day of fax machines. The fax machine just stopped working. And in panic, I called SBDC, which I'd never worked with before. And that was the beginning of a 20-year relationship between the two of us, my wife included, so 3. And we got a counselor. I think I talked to him at least every 6 months for that 20 years. And a lot of times, a lot more. So as we, so he helped us with little marketing during the slowdown in 9/11, and that passed, and the nursery continued to grow. And then, as with any growing business, and of course, understanding that I'm a plant guy, I'm not a business guy, so I had to learn everything on the fly. We started having some marketing needs, and then we started having some HR needs as we started taking on staff. How do you do that? Went to SBDC. Our counselor came over, and he actually set us up with a HR company. So he directed us as we grew. But in that 20 years, we quadrupled the size of the sales and nursery. We quadrupled the staff to the point where we had 14 year-round staff and up to 50 in the springtime. So making a considerable impact in the area. I think there's it seems like every time I run into a kid in their 30s now, they worked for me at some time in the nursery. And then in 2008, 2 months before the stock market crashed, we were fortunate to be ground zero for the tornado that you might remember cut a swath through New Hampshire. And it really wreaked havoc on our facilities and wounded one person, luckily not everybody. And I don't think we even called SBDC. The next day they were there. Apparently they heard it on the radio, and they all said, "Did you hear what happened to the nursery?" And they came over and helped us. And that was one of the most stressful weeks of my life, trying to figure out what to do, convincing the staff that we weren't going to shut down, figuring out how to ship planes. And SBDC was there. And then the insurance company sent their special wing-ding from Chicago to essentially convince us that we weren't going to get nearly the money that we had hoped to get. And SBDC was at that meeting. So they're all the time involved with long-term planning. And so just to think that this isn't the only thing we worked with. We had the 4 pillars. We had an accountant. We had a lawyer. We were in a peer-to-peer business advisory group, but SBDC was there. And if I didn't call, once in a while they'll call, "How's it going? How's it going?" So it was fantastic. We sold the nursery 4 years ago to our long-term nursery manager, which is fantastic. At the building up to that closing, we had an SBDC agent working with us, and he had one. So right there, the trade-off took place very cleanly. So just thinking about the statistics that we heard, that 99% of the businesses in New Hampshire, maybe I'm a little high, maybe it's 95%, are small businesses. And nearly, if I looked this up before I came here, nearly half of all employees in New Hampshire are in small businesses. I can't think of a better way to support small business in New Hampshire than to support the Small Business Development Center. And since this being an agricultural business, and since this funding is for rural development, there's tons of agricultural business out there trying to make a way, and what they need is business help, because there's a whole difference between growing something and running a business. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next one on the list is Wendy Hunt.
Good afternoon. Nice to see everyone. I'm Wendy Hunt, President and CEO of the Greater Nashville Chamber of Commerce. Put my glasses on. As you can imagine, in my role as a chamber CEO, I get asked to serve on a lot of boards. So I'm very selective about the ones I choose. First, by way of will, participating on this board in the best interest of businesses we serve. And second, is it an organization that I'm passionate about? Well, in light of the fact I'm sitting here not only as a New Hampshire SBDC board member, but as the board chair, I guess you can tell I tick both boxes. Today I am speaking, though, not as the board chair, but as through the lens as the chamber CEO and also as the immediate past chair of the New Hampshire Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives. I joined this board 3 years ago, and that was right about the time, or just prior to COVID, and I know we're tired of talking about it, but I just want to quickly give you why I'm so passionate about SBDC through that business lens. Prior to COVID, I saw how SBDC advisors met with clients in all phases of their businesses, whether they were about to begin, just had an idea, wanted to start a business, wanted to expand a business, or or as Peter just said, were ready to retire and looking for a succession plan for a sale. They're here for all phases. Then COVID hit and business plummeted. They couldn't get anyone to answer their calls or emails to navigate through this sudden closures and certain features. Not their banks, not their attorneys, or really anyone else could offer immediate advice or assurance. But you know, answered their phone? Well, the Chambers did, and so did SBDC. I fielded dozens of calls each day from both members and non-member businesses. We helped them all regardless of their chamber membership status. And each time I connected them to the New Hampshire SBDC, and each time advisors were with them all the way through. They assisted them in a multitude of ways. New Hampshire SBDC also stayed on top of the constantly changing federal rules and regulations, which if you remember, it was almost daily that we did not know what was going on. It was a Herculean task. It's my strong belief that New Hampshire SBDC saved thousands of businesses from ruin, and all at no cost to these businesses. Fast forward to post-COVID, and as Liz was saying, their services are at almost an all-time high of being needed by businesses. And why is this? Because they were successful and word spread about the SBDC. Now, I can tell you, Chambers before, we did not have a thorough working relationship with the New Hampshire SBDC. I can tell you in every zip code that there's a Chamber of Commerce in the state, we all work hand in hand with SBDC. So I would encourage you to support this bill.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Now representing the great metropolis of Rochester, one of the best in the whole state, if I do say so myself, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. And believe it or not,
Gotta get your light. There you go.
And believe it or not, Rochester is considered rural. So my name is Mike Scala. I'm the Director of Economic Development for the City of Rochester. I also sit on the SBDC Advisory Board. But even prior to that, we worked with SBDC in a partnership with my department, the Economic Development Department. One of our main tenets is the attraction and support of our local businesses. And that's well and good, but sometimes, it requires a capacity that we currently don't have. There's 2 people in my office, and some of the things they require, we just can't provide in the time that we have, pro formas, business plans, that sort of thing. So partnering with SBDC is a tremendous help to us, and it allows us to have access to a capacity that we normally wouldn't have. We have an advisor that comes in once a month, and we're able to, direct businesses to him to meet with or to carry on, to follow up, to whatever's needed. And that really provides a benefit to the city and our stated goal of supporting our businesses. I can't say enough good things about the SBDC, even prior to me being on their board. They're very professional, they're very good, and to me, they're a great way to leverage essentially a small amount of money into a great benefit in the creation and protection of jobs, assessed value, which is always one of the things we strive for too. But I think it's a great organization. I support this bill, and I thank Senator Innes for sponsoring it.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last one on my list, Erica. Gotta get your light lit.
There we go. It's been a minute. My name is Erica Canales. I am the Executive Director of COAS Economic Development Corporation, and I am here today to support this bill. Our mission, and being the northernmost regional development corporation, is to promote an economic growth and strong workforce and thriving business environment. As you can imagine, being involved with a rural economy, it is a labor of love. COAS alone includes 1 city, 19 towns, 23 incorporated areas, and while CEDC and SBDC do collaborate in the same business coaching space, let me tell you, there's literally 2.5 of us for the largest county in this state. We support each other with overflow, but let me tell you, there is so much more need than either of our 2 organizations can do. Our underserved North Country communities have so many people that want to start or expand their businesses and literally do not know how to do so without our help. Supporting them is of the utmost importance to us. They are the everyday living mom-pop businesses, as well as supporting our New Hampshire hospitality and tourism industries. We ask that you support this bill to ensure Coos County does not lose a valuable partner. Thank you.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. That was the last person on my list. Is there anybody that didn't sign up that wants to speak? Seeing none, there were 7 people supporting and 1 opposed who signed up online. And with that, we'll close this hearing. And it'll be just a minute before we open the last hearing of the day, 493. You see, maybe we should have a zip line. So. And we are ready for Senate Bill.
Yes, it is. They decided to really put me to
and
work.
He gets to introduce himself again.
Yes, I do. Are we ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Dan Ennis from Bradford, New Hampshire, representing District 7. And this is an interesting bill. I tried to get a number of folks to show up to testify today, but as you're aware, there's an election, and they couldn't come.
And that may be the reason that we have 9 people who signed up online in support.
There you are.
Only 1 opposed.
Yes. So this particular bill, Senate Bill 493, is designed to help communities in the case of natural disasters. And as we've heard many times from farmers, trail riders, and so on, this has been a tough year. And I know some folks in Croydon, and Croydon was especially hard hit by the storms this spring. And they suffered an awful lot of road damage, far beyond what the town itself could afford to repair. In fact, the road damage was several times the town's budget. So there was a question, well, how can we help these communities to get funds quickly and to get to work on repairing their roads, bridges, or whatever it is that might be damaged? So the idea was to try to create a fund that would help to support communities as they get off the ground. And a lot of times we find that federal disaster funds take some time to receive. So the objective here is to provide a little bit of money that towns could apply to receive and immediately start to work in repairing the roads and bridges in their community, or whatever it is that's damaged in their community. At the same time, the expectation is that the community will apply through the state for FEMA funds to handle the repairs. And if those funds are received, the state would be paid back by the community and everybody would be made whole. In the event those funds are not received, which is always possible, then these monies would convert to a loan. And that loan would be paid over a period of time in a way that the town could handle it. It's a pretty good concept here. And I think, if you read through the bill, particularly Section 2, you get the details. Loans from the fund will be available for a period not to exceed 5 years at 0% interest. But if FEMA funds aren't obtained, the loan should be paid in full within 5 years. If the town, municipality, city can't pay it in that time, then it would accrue interest at the current prime rate, adjusted each year, and has to be paid off within 10 years. So I think this is a decent step forward to help smaller communities in particular to deal with disasters that are beyond the scope of their community to fund adequately. FEMA takes some time in many cases, oftentimes months, even a year, to release funds. Towns with roads that have been destroyed, particularly thoroughfares or access to isolated areas, can't wait that long. And I think this bill addresses that situation and provides an opportunity to help our communities. I'm happy to take any questions.
Senator Birdsall has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. The concept is that they would apply for FEMA funds, and then they would eventually, then we would give them the loan.
Correct.
Do we know, when you apply for the FEMA loans, do you know how much they're going to get, the municipality is going to get?
No, not generally.
Alma?
Then how do we know how much we're going to loan the municipality if we don't know what the FEMA loan is?
I think that's a good question. And, you know, I'm not sure, let me put it this way. If a town like Croydon has $1 million in damage, they apply for FEMA funds, get $750,000. Conceivable, that could happen, right? The $250,000 remains with Croydon to repay to the state under the terms described below. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions from Senator D'Alessandro?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing this forward. But correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Ennis. During the Olmsted floods, when some of us were here, I thought the governor set up a program where if you had a disaster, you could go to the executive branch and ask for a loan, and it would be a low interest or no interest loan. Is that still in place?
To my knowledge, it is not. And the communities I've talked to, if it is in place, are totally unaware of it. And OLS didn't raise it either as an issue. So I'm not sure. I think it's worth checking out, and I'm happy to do that before we exec the bill.
Right.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
NHMA. Ms. Heck.
Thank you, Chairman Gray and members of the committee. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Catherine Heck, and I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are here to support this bill. I think everything was basically covered by Senator Ennis in that we have natural disasters. Some are FEMA covered. I will say that it can take up to 18 months to 2 years in some situations to start seeing those funds come in. There is a matching component in many cases. And then there are some events that are not covered by FEMA, and this bill kind of would address either of those circumstances. I am trying to look up the legislation that passed several years ago in relation to the Olmsted floods. I believe it's a little bit different than this particular tool. So I will look that up for you, Senator D'Alessandro, and make sure that you have that information. You're welcome. And I'm certainly happy to take any questions, but I will leave it to say that some municipalities, if you have an operating budget of $2 million in our small communities and you have $1 million or more in expenses and you need cars, people to be able to leave their homes immediately, or even a larger community, I suppose, of course, and you need buses to get school children to school because they don't even have heat in their homes, you need dollars immediately. So anytime we can address an immediate need and have a 0% interest rate to do so is a really fantastic partnership until such time we can get the proper funding.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As I said before, there were 9 people who signed in support, 1 opposed online. Is there anyone here that wants to testify and has not?
Mr. Chair, do we have anybody from Homeland Security? Because I'm kind of curious about the fiscal note on this.
Apparently we do. We can bring him up.
You thought he could get away with that.
I was sitting in the back and everything.
And your name?
Robert Buxton, I'm the Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for the state of New Hampshire.
Just ask a question?
Yeah, go.
Well, I'm looking at the fiscal note, and I guess I'm curious why we need 5 full-time positions to administer a $5 million loan fund.
So currently,
in our funding stream for HSEM, we only have 2 positions that are funded by the general fund. Everything else is grant funded or funded by FEMA management cost. You're basically setting up an independent state-run recovery program, which we cannot use FEMA management costs to pay for the administration of that. So that's why we need to set up a branch to handle that workload. And that is the estimated cost. Right now, we're managing 11 disasters in the state. So it's a pretty busy area.
Paul?
Absolutely.
It seems excessive to me to need that many people to manage this small amount of money. I mean, we wouldn't be looking at a lot of grant applications. I can't imagine it'd be more than 10 or a dozen in any given disaster. I mean, typically if you had, I guess, a large-scale disaster like a hurricane or something perhaps, but typically these storm cells kind of hit one section like the Connecticut River Valley. But I just was curious on it.
Yep.
It caught my eye when I read it.
Further comment? Okay. Any additional questions? Seeing none? Thank you very much. And still no one else? Okay. We will close the public hearing on this, and I'll take a motion to go into executive session. We have a motion and a second to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We are in executive session. I don't really anticipate execing out any bills today, but I did want to point out a couple of things. On the list that you've gotten, our aide has put in some dollar figures on some of those to help you along. Remember, my thought is that we're going to collect up these things, and as we get towards the end of the time that we are allowed to keep them, we will make decisions based on how much money that we have to be able to do things and set priorities. And then the other things that are of worthy may end up passing here but getting tabled on the floor because we're just not able to support the money for them. Another thing that I wanted to bring up is on Senate Bill 396. Do they have that amendment? Okay. So everybody's got that amendment. I do not like to take money out of the Education Trust Fund. That being said, on this particular issue, since there was confusion over whether or not those fans for the vocational school could be funded through the state, and there was misinformation and other things, that right now, because there are other projects out there that deserve the funding that we do have. One way to do that and still provide that funding for other projects would be to make a one-time, and I stress one-time exception, such that we would possibly fund that if you are in favor of the amendment. So I want to give you time to look at that, time to think about it. Senator D'Alessandro, hit your button.
Yeah. I think that the amendment, first time I've seen it, but obviously we should consider the amendment. But shouldn't we find out what the hell happened with DOE with regard to this? I mean, they clawed back the money and said the money couldn't be used. What's it all about? DOE has made numerous transfers in their money to do certain things. Like they took money from the robotics that was supposed to go out to the communities and used it to abate a problem at the building which they left, and they're not going to go to anymore. So we took money to take care of asbestos from the robotics fund, and here they're clawing back money from a designated purpose. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Grant, would you contact the commissioner by email and ask him to either provide an update on that or come to the next meeting?
I think Mickey could.
Oh, Mickey, all right.
So what this came down to was In the 2019 capital budget is where this CT renovation was initially funded. In 2021, the project was still having payouts, so the lapse was extended until 2023. When this past session, the capital budget was being worked on, this project was still active, and the question was, can this project be closed out, or does the lapse need to be extended? And I think at that time, the department had thought the project was closed out, so that's why the lapse was not extended. So there were funds available in the capital budget for this, but because of the technicality of it getting lapsed, that's what's necessitating this appropriation.
Senator D'Alessandro?
Thank you. Mick, thank you very much for that, Mick. But Mick, remember, they didn't have enough money to begin with. We scraped and found the additional funds so that they could complete the project. And we worked hard to do that in order to make sure that that project got finished. And what happened that caused this glitch where we worked diligently to make sure there was enough money to finish the project?
And this is my understanding, the money was appropriated, but it was unintentionally lapsed, thinking the project was complete when there were still payments to be made. I think that's what it came down to.
Well,
Senator, it probably, instead of having Grant do it, it probably would be good for you to contact the commissioner and get your questions answered.
Right, I'll do that.
Appreciate it.
Sure. I'll save Grant some time.
All right.
I already had the email written, but thank you, sir.
That's right. Send that under my name. That saves me
But it's
time.
hard to put your email address on there without your assistance there, Senator.
Okay.
Okay, they're all open for you to comment on if you want to comment before.
I just had a question.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. You, I think, had said to us that your goal was to hold on to the larger appropriation bills, and I was wondering what larger meant to you.
It means whatever the majority of us seven say it is.
Okay.
And again, there are things that certainly, when we look at the appropriations for the farmers, okay, when we come to springtime, they're going to need the money unless we do something with that. But enough said about that. If we can fund it through ARPA money or some other, Help America Act money, etc., they can get it faster. We can do it right through fiscal, and they can get the money and do what we want. So I don't want to act too fast. Haste makes waste, and all of those acronyms that we got out there.
But again, based on that statement, isn't it an imperative that we know how much ARPA money is left?
And
Or won't be spent.
And that has been a question that has been hard to answer. Yes.
But indeed, it's fundamental to the decision-making process here, because that money's got to be spent. Or we send it back if it isn't spent. That puts us in a hole.
So, I think what we need to do is through the fiscal committee, we need to ask for that kind of information in our next meeting.
Okay.
And I'll make that request of LBA right now. Is that be
That's
added somewhere? Okay.
Okay.
You can have the Hampstead Hospital, $23 million.
Not going there. Not going there.
Right. What's in a hot minute?
All right. Is there any, well, first of all, I want to ask, is there any other bill that is on our list that people would like to at least make a comment or talk about? Oh, we've got two more comments at least.
I think, thank you for bringing the numbers forward, because when you look at these numbers, in order to fund all of these things, this exceeds the budget, to be honest with you, in many ways. Because you got 8, you got 25, you got 20, you got 40. This is a very, very significant amount of money. But now we can actually see what these bills will cost. And I think that gives us at least some ability to think. Now, second question, or second
Say
statement.
thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Deb, as always. Thank you very much. You did a great job. Now, there's the one situation where the water situation, we're told that doesn't require any general funds. I think the word on the street is that will be taken care of with, out of the trust, and the communities will participate in paying. That's what I've heard, Jeff. That's the feedback that's coming back. So if that's true, that saves us a great deal of money. If it isn't true, there's a project that's going to cost us $25 million.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we were going to find out the funding from the municipality, if the number that we had was correct, or if it could be higher or lower based on those things, and I don't know that I have the answer on all of that.
Didn't we get a memo on that?
Hit your button.
Didn't we get a memo from Bob Scott on that? I thought we did.
It's Senate Bill 393.
393.
We got a note from LBA.
Yeah.
And that forwarded Commissioner Scott.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Most of the construction. Most of the construction is in Derry with assets to be owned by the town, so we believe no impact. The Manchester Waterworks franchise area in Londonderry will require roughly $3 million in improvements to their system.
So what I would suggest is that if someone does want to bring that forward in our next executive session, that make sure that we know about it so that we can be prepared. Additional things.
Can I just,
Oh, that's right, Senator Rosenwald, you did have your hand up from the floor.
My understanding is the same as Senator D'Alessandro's. Last week I ran into Chuck Morse and we spoke about this project and he said there won't be any general funds needed. So I don't know what he might be working on with Senator Abbas.
And neither do I.
Okay.
so
Senator Birdsall.
when we get some confirmation, could we get a listing of all of the output of money, like what areas it's going to be, the amount of money, and what fund it's going to come out of?
Are you just talking about this bill?
Yeah,
Yeah. We
Okay.
could ask,
kind of like a spreadsheet.
yeah, we could ask the commissioner to provide that to the committee.
That'd be good.
And if that requires an amendment, then we would want to do that. To make sure that the funding sources, similar to the language that you put into yours, Bill, that we looked at earlier today, is that if those sources, aren't able to provide the money, then it's not appropriated. But again, that'll be up to us, the committee, to either accept or reject that language.
Well, and if I could, I know that we had asked the commissioner whether this could be done in phases.
Yep.
And he said yes. I didn't really understand the phases that he spoke about in his
And-
memo.
Again, and I have heard the statement also that it wouldn't require any general fund money, but if it doesn't require any general fund money, then I don't need to put it in phases because
Well, that's true.
it's going to come from other places. And again, I don't have a good handle, like yourself, on the total thing and how this is all going to work. And so, we'll take a week. We've asked the LBA to assist us in this, and see if we can't come up with a plan forward.
If we have a date that we're going to executive bill, Commissioner
You're gonna need to hit your button.
Scott,
Does it? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. If
If we
you're gonna
have
talk.
a date that we know we're gonna exec the bill, Commissioner Scott would be happy to come by for any additional questions that might come up.
To be honest with you, I wouldn't exec the bill without him being here because of the fact that, A, we have his memo, B, we have former Senator Morse's comments vis-a-vis the situation, and he really could control he was in control of the trust and the outlay of money from the trust. And it'd be interesting to find out how much money is left in the trust, because we did give money out of the trust to Pennachuck, did we not? Did we give them $5 million so that they could extend their water line to the areas in Merrimack and Bedford where there was it more than that? No, I remember $5 million, that one situation. But I mean, all of these things are now coming into play, and as a result of that, they're key ingredients to the information, to the decision-making process.
The sense I'm getting from the committee is that you would like to exec it sooner than later.
Yes.
We'll put it on the agenda or put it in the notes that we'll try to exec it next week, but that is going to depend upon what we get from LBA and the commissioner's availability and Senator Bradley's recommendation.
Okay, if you look at page 2 of this memo, that Commissioner Scott sent us, there are 3 ways, based on the questions that we asked him, to spread out the costs into 25 and 26. That's number 1. And number 2, my understanding is there's over $100 million in the Groundwater Trust Fund, with $20 million roughly accounted for in this fiscal year. So I think that, we potentially could, use more of the trust fund. The other question that was asked, and is not really addressed in this memo, is, would the towns be willing to make a larger commitment? But also remember that the overall cost of the project's $37 million. The bill is asking for 25, with the $12 million coming from the town. So I think that my view would be that we should, whether we have the LBA to work with Commissioner Scott over the intervening week, or get him in here to answer these questions as to, A, spreading it out into FY26, and B, using more of the trust fund. And I think that is where we should head.
Does anybody want to make a comment on what they believe that we should do on those issues?
I think that Senator Brand makes good sense. The situation has a direct effect on the city of Manchester, because that Massapequa, the level of Massapequa has to be raised by 2 feet. That's what's going to supply the water. So you got that situation in play. That water's going to flow south, and then there's the situation of there's an initial contract in place as we speak for the money that flows south that expires in 5 years. That'll be renegotiated. So again, the question is, what cost must Manchester bear, or could that cost be absorbed by the trust? Because that's a key ingredient to this. If you don't have the water, you can do anything. But if you don't have the quantity of the water to flow, it doesn't make any sense to do anything if you can't get the right number.
Senator.
Mr. Chair, do we have hearings next week before we would be execing? I just realized I have an eye doctor's appointment at 1 o'clock next Tuesday, and I'm just thinking about our
We
executive
do
strategy.
have, how many hearings?
2.
2.
So I'm not certain that I would be back before you go into exec session.
Okay, well.
In light of that, I'm just thinking about the 348, if I'm not here next week to introduce the amendment and exec it. Maybe an alternate plan that you'd want to consider?
That's certainly possible to do.
Yeah, we might have to do 348 next week.
Do you plan to exec everything next week?
No, because
There's a lot.
Well,
Again,
anything
the
we
only,
want on this-
only ones I want to push through are the ones that we decide as a group need to go first and fast.
Well, that's one that needs to, and I'm just concerned that I won't be here possibly for it.
Yours, the farm one, is more dependent upon what we can get through fiscal.
Understood.
You know, in the final end, and whatever we write for an amendment needs to recognize that, we'll say you've asked for 8, I believe, and if we think that, the least we'll get from fiscal is maybe 5, you know, that the maximum appropriation may be 3, you know, but may be reduced based on funding from other sources, or, you know, the amendment needs to address that.
I can introduce the amendment.
Understood. I think we could do that pretty simply with a committee amendment.
Okay.
Relatively easy.
Senator?
I think we could work on the Small Business Development Corporation bill, but I do think we could fund the 1 year and then direct the department to add this funding in their budget request for the next biennium, so that they have more assurance on, I don't know if you'd be on board with that, but.
Well, the problem that I have is that we made some very hard decisions when we did the budget last year. And certainly, I think that SBDC is important. I believe it is a good organization. But again, if I'm opening up the budget on a decision that I've already made, then I have to think twice about it. So I'm not for it, I'm not against it, it's just, you know, we are doing precedent kind of things. And I think I've got questions on both sides, but you
I just
you
said that
had
we
the
just
floor.
did that a couple of weeks ago with the town of Hampstead.
Absolutely.
So we've already set our own precedent.
But the town of Hampstead, in making sure that the things that were going on that we thought we knew but didn't have a good handle on for the end, again, makes that a one-off kind of a thing for Hampstead. So, you know, as much as you say that we did, we just need to do those things thoughtfully. And again, I think that Ms. Gray does a great job down there. It's no relation to me.
Really?
No. My ancestry comes from New York, all the Grays, so there's nobody around here. That the family name was actually Greasy, but when they immigrated in the 1840s, you know, the name was changed. So, and they settled in New York. But again, you know, this is one of the ones that we made a hard decision on and gave them a particular amount of money. And if we leave it on the list and it's on the priority list, and we've got the money at the end to make that one of the ones we put a check mark next to, that's what we're going to do. And, you know, us, the collective us, are going to be the ones that make those decisions at the end. Senator Bradley.
Yeah, thank you. Since that bill was brought up, maybe one of you can answer. I thought that we actually increased their appropriation by several $100,000 last year. Isn't that correct?
I think we've got an answer.
I think it was
Yes,
150.
yes, you gave them 110,000 in each year, so they got 220,000.
Over and above?
What they had before previous years.
Thank you.
Senator Bertzel.
And I might add, Hampstead was different than the SPD because we had voted in the amendment to include it into the budget. It never made it into the budget, was the difference.
Why didn't the deputy commissioner in agriculture make it all the way through?
Well, there's an interesting situation. How do we appropriate the money and all of a sudden he didn't get the appointment? That's a mistake.
I think the answer to that is House Bill 2 was 130, 140 pages,
Yeah.
And we were working diligently.
No question.
And had an awful lot of discussion about Medicaid rate increases, education funding. Those were complex issues. We put a lot of effort into some of the mental health funding. I mean, you know, take us back to where we were. I don't think it's just a mistake that Hampstead and Jasper's position got neglected. That's all. Just a mistake.
I'm more than willing to say mea culpa, mea maxima culpa.
No.
But
things happen.
Right, and we're going
That's all
forward.
it is.
Right.
And we're going forward.
Forward, that's where we're going, forward. I like that.
Onward Christian soldiers marching as to war.
I don't want that. I don't want that.
Yeah.
Marching on to peace. That's what I'd like to see, that one.
All right. Any other comments on any of the bills?
We did have Director Brian Wilson here from DNCR if you wanted to talk about SB 345, the fiscal
If you'd like to speak, we're willing to listen. At least I am. Yep. All right, 345, one of the things that I asked LBA about on 345 is when I read the fiscal note, I had no idea how much, ballpark. And I've asked them in the future to think about setting up brackets, 10,000 or less, 100,000 to 10,000, 200,000 or whatever in the future. But this one, I didn't know how many people passes we had, how much, the discount was going to be, and I didn't have any way to get there, so.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Brian Wilson, the Director of Division of Parks and Recreation. We also had a very hard time wrapping our heads around the potential impacts of this bill because the language in the bill is not specific to the approach that we would take, whether that's to reduce the current resident rate for day use entry or to increase the non-resident rate for day use entry to create that 50% differential. So without knowing that, we tried to revise our fiscal note to provide a range of impact, which has a pretty big span from going a negative impact on revenue to potential increase in revenue for if we were to increase the non-resident rate. Excuse me. Another challenge that we had too is we don't currently have a lot of data because we don't currently require proof of residency for day use. So some of our methodology is based off of, in part, our reservation system that we started in 2019, where we allow for people to make advanced reservations for day use. Our concern with this bill really in the biggest part is the practical implementation of how this would look. We have, in 2023, we had over 1 million visitors to day use parks across the park system. The language as it is right now would require us to have a residency proof for each and every one of those visitors. So if you think about coming in to Pawtuckaway State Park or Wellington Beach State Park, and oftentimes, especially on busy weekends, we have lines, we have queuing that goes out onto town roads. We've worked with towns all across the state on ways where we can create that flow of traffic into the park faster. This would require us to check every single person's residency. And there's also already a number of things that we have to check for at that checkpoint to get into any of these parks. So for us, it wasn't really so much about the funding. And when we heard the sponsors' testimony last week, my interpretation of that was based off a constituent's experience about coming into a park during a time of capacity and seeing non-residents within the park. So we don't really feel like increasing the rate is really addressing the capacity issues that we have at the park. Further, we already have the authority, the commissioner has the authority to recommend fee package changes, and we've had great success working with the fiscal committee over the last year of implementing different fee changes or fee increases through the park system, whether that's at Cannon Mountain or metered parking at the Seacoast, and then just recently, a couple months ago, we applied an increase to our camping fees across the board, which also we were neutral to whether there was a residency. There was no residency test within that as well too. So our concern with this, although it does have the possibility of generating more revenue for the state park fund, those are things that we have been asked and charged to look at. Our State Park Advisory Council has been working closely with us as well too, and we've been kind of parsing out each different part of our P package to make sure that we're taking a thorough and analytical approach and realizing what the impacts would be. So we're just concerned about whether this is good policy or not to create boundaries within our current authority to set fees ourselves.
And so that if someone wanted to go to one of the parks, my brother from Illinois, okay, and I made the reservation, you wouldn't know what to charge. Is that pretty much right?
Right. If you made the reservation and he was going to be in your car with you, you could select that at the time of your reservation. We would still have to verify that at the time that you arrived, and that would apply for the way that it works now.
Senator Bradley.
So has any thought been given to, trying to get more data and implementing this as a pilot program and, pick 1 or 2 state parks? Or does that make it even more complicated?
I think it's not impossible. So, for instance, in just our last 48 hours of kind of trying to put together some evaluation to this after hearing at the Energy Committee last week, for instance, we looked at the Flume Gorge, for instance. Our current fee package does not differentiate between resident and non-resident. However, you show up, you park in your parking lot, you can go up to multiple different ticket windows and check in just like you can at Cannon Mountain, where we also set our fees to have resident and non-resident. So that would be an example where we would say, it makes sense in this application for it to work here and really has no impact on everybody else trying to get in. It's the coming in a line and having to verify that at one single checkpoint that really creates the challenge for us. Again, we were very happy to get the kind of the camping, which was almost kind of a decade in the making since the last time those fees have been changed. That happened a couple months ago. Our next step was to really start to do a deeper dive into what the day use fees look like and to perhaps bring forward another recommendation to the fiscal committee at some point, because those fees haven't been touched in a long time as well either. The flip side of that is we want to make the parks as accessible as possible. So this isn't just simply a mechanism of keeping pace with other escalating costs or inflation, but really looking at who's coming. Our self-funding model, we've been very successful to self-support ourselves. So therefore, why just go out and ask for fee increases if we don't really need them? Could we put those resources to good use? Absolutely, but it's a delicate balance. And the legislature has designed the system to be just like that for us to be able to do our due diligence and look at that.
Senator Birdsall.
Just out of curiosity, have you thought, I'm sure you've thought a lot of this, have you thought about, much like some of our other areas where a resident can purchase an annual package and issued a card so that they're just brought in at a reduced amount?
Yes, thank you. Great question. So we do have a number of different offerings that are like that. You can purchase the state park license plate, which you can't get if you're non-resident. So that's essentially a season pass. You can also buy just a season pass or like a pass packet that gives you, some number of admissions. And we set aside a certain percentage of our parking inventory for reservations, for people to plan in advance, and that has been extraordinarily helpful for us. And we find the feedback that we get from visitors is that it's very helpful for those that want to plan ahead and secure that spot. They're going to get an email reminder, some safety tips. It really goes to helping just convey more information and have a better touch point before they even arrive at the park. But then we also have an inventory within our parking space for the people who just decided to come that day and to show up. And those are things that are very fluid. Every day is a little unique. It depends, you know. The example that was given last week was at Kingston State Park. So obviously, Massachusetts visitors are probably going to be more prevalent at Kingston on any given day than maybe a park in the central region. These are all different things that we're looking at, and through our current ability to evaluate that and bring changes to our fee package to the fiscal committee, we feel like we've got the power to already do really what's being asked here. We have more concerns about what the impact would be at kind of an operational level here, and really, visitor satisfaction. If I'm as a resident of New Hampshire, I don't want to be in line behind 10 other cars that are trying to get in, where each one of those is taking, several minutes longer than it currently does for those folks to get in. We want it to be quick and easy. If you ever want to know what it's like to work in state parks, come sit in a ticket booth for any given day, and our current menu of things that we already kind of go through for other complimentary passes, whether it's disabled veterans or active military and things like that. There's a lot of different opportunities for residents to get in.
I know that I've learned a lot about different things, or I shouldn't say learned, because they went by so quick that I'm not sure I could remember them all. But it might be helpful for you to have a meeting with Senator Murphy and go over some of that same things that you were talking about, advanced reservations and the plates and everything else about what we do for residents right now. And we may be able to come to some other arrangement or something more concrete in this bill, or decide that we're doing a lot now that they didn't know about. So, additional questions?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming in today. I know, last week in Energy, Senator Bertzel and I had the benefit of the information the other members didn't. Could you just talk a little bit about what percentage of the folks coming in you feel are, excuse me, non-resident, I'm sorry, and what percentage are doing a reservation online currently?
Sure, I'll try to do my best here. They made it really tiny for me. Where we have pretty strong data on that is through our reservation system, and really across the board, that's about 50% resident and non-residents who are making those advanced reservations to coming. And we see that generally in our camping as well. Camping is a little bit higher, about 60% non-residents. So I would say it's about a 50-50 mix of individuals visiting the park. And then I'm sorry, the second part of your question?
That's kind of,
okay.
What percentage are reserving online versus buying tickets at the window?
About 30% people are reserving, which is great. It really is helpful for us to be able to plan in advance. It really is helpful, and with our capacity issues that we have really across our overloved park system, it's a great way for us to be able to provide that extra touch point, as I mentioned earlier, of sending them a verification. We know you're coming. Here are some extra tips to be thinking about, and some other ways to engage those people before they even arrive. So hopefully to have a better informed visitor when they come for that first time.
So a thought I had, building off from Senator Bradley's suggestion for a pilot program, is perhaps you offer, a fee increase for non-resident, but you offer an online discount for residents who could go online and get a discount. It's just a thought. I mean, these are things I'll toss out to you. That might be a way that you kind of achieve the end goal of having a resident have, a ability to use the park at a cheaper rate than a non-resident. Just a thought.
Well, again, I think that, having a conversation with Senator Murphy, the sponsor of the bill, explaining to him what is available right now, we may be able to come to something. Senator Bradley.
So the other thing that we could consider doing is turning the bill from a mandate into asking your division to make a report back to the legislature on what options might look like for resident discounts. Not have a study committee, but, just ask for a report. And I think we've done that in HHS over the last couple of years. It's been fairly successful. That's another option, so we could pass the bill asking for that. So, just thought.
Anyone else on Parks? All right, Parks is closed. Anything on any of the other bills? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Our business of the day being complete, we are adjourned. Don't need to vote. Robert's rules lets you do that.
No.